I had been married for just 1 year when my husband started falling ill. He became so sick that all the doctors gave up hope. I consulted the best doctors in the city for my husband's treatment, but none of them gave any hope. They all said he had only a few days left. As days passed, his condition kept worsening. One thing about my husband made me very angry. Every night, he would call me to his side, show me a photo, and say, "Marry this man after my death." Seeing that picture made my soul shudder and my blood boil, because the photo was of a 70-year-old man, and I was a 24-year-old young woman. I felt immense sorrow hearing my husband's words. I prayed to God for his long life, because I loved my husband deeply and wanted to spend my life with him. One day, my husband passed away, and I became a widow. My world had completely shattered. I hadn't even come out of my grief when my mother-in-law came to me and said, "Now quickly marry the man your husband told you to." Hearing this, I stared at her in disbelief. I didn't want to marry again, but I was forced to marry that man. On the wedding night, when my husband came into my room, I screamed at the sight of him because he was, "My name is Bimla, and I am from Patna." I was the only daughter of my parents and came from a middle-class family. My parents raised and educated me, and afterward, they told me they wanted to arrange my marriage. But I told them, "Dad, I don't want to get married right now. I want to continue my studies." I was my parents' beloved daughter, and they always listened to me, so they agreed to this as well. They allowed me to continue my education, and I also started working in an office. The people in the office were all very nice, and I made good friends with everyone. When I saw my boss for the first time, I couldn't take my eyes off him because he was a very handsome and young man. All the girls in the office would always hover around him, finding excuses to go to his cabin, and some even wanted to marry him. I also liked him a lot, but I never behaved in any way that could raise questions about my character, because my parents had trusted me and allowed me to work. I didn't want to break their trust under any circumstances, and I never wanted to do anything that could tarnish my parents' reputation. I thought that if God had destined this man for me, he would put love for me in his heart because matches are made in heaven. His name was Suraj, and he was a very good person. I didn't talk much with my boss, and whatever little interaction we had was always about work. Whenever he spoke to me or any other girl, he always kept his eyes lowered. He had great respect for women and girls. I also wanted my husband to be a decent man who knows how to respect women. One day, Suraj said to me, "I like you a lot. Will you marry me?" I already liked Suraj and wanted to marry him. My heart told me to say yes, but I replied, "I can't marry you without my parents' consent. If they agree to this relationship, I have no objections." Suraj also said, "All right, ask your parents. We will only get married if they agree, otherwise we won't." I told my parents everything and also told them about Suraj, explaining that he was a good person. They immediately agreed. I told Suraj that my parents had approved of our marriage, and he was very happy. But I was shocked to hear that Suraj's father was not agreeing to our marriage. Suraj often talked to me about his parents, and I thought they would eventually agree, but it seemed they had already chosen another girl for him and wanted Suraj to marry her. Suraj loved his parents very much and could not marry me without their consent, so he told me that I would have to wait until his parents agreed. I said, "All right, convince your parents. I am ready to wait for you for the rest of my life." Suraj tried every possible way to convince his parents. Finally, he told them that if he couldn't marry me, he wouldn't marry anyone else. In the end, his parents had to give in to his stubbornness and agreed to our marriage. They came to our house with a marriage proposal. Suraj's mother was happy to see me and said, "My son has made a great choice." Hearing Suraj's mother's words gave me comfort. At least they liked me. I was worried about what would happen if they rejected me after meeting me. A few days later, Suraj and I got married, and I moved into my in-laws' house. On our wedding night, when Suraj entered my room, he praised me a lot and said, "In the end, love has won, and today we are finally together." Suraj told me, "I love you very much," and then took out a box from his pocket and handed it to me. When I opened it, I found a beautiful diamond set inside. I told Suraj, "This is very beautiful." Suraj replied, "It is beautiful, but not more than you." Hearing Suraj's words, I smiled. He then said to me, "Take good care of my parents and consider them as your own. Even if they say something to you, don't respond back. I had a hard time convincing them about our marriage, and I don't want them to be upset with you over anything." I assured him, "Don't worry, I'll take care of them." A few days after our wedding, we went on our honeymoon. My husband spent lavishly on me and bought me expensive gifts every day. After returning from the honeymoon, I told my mother-in-law that I would take over all the household responsibilities and that she shouldn't worry. However, she refused, saying, "The servants handle all the work, and I cook myself." Hearing this, I nodded. I was free all day at home, so Suraj suggested that I rejoin the office, saying it would keep me occupied. I rejoined the office the very next day. Now, my husband and I would go to the office together and return together. We would even have lunch together. Suraj often took me out and also took me shopping. Sometimes I felt that my in-laws were not happy with me. When I mentioned this to Suraj, he would tell me, "There's nothing like that, and as long as I'm with you, you don't need to worry about anything." I had a sister-in-law, and whenever I tried to talk to her or asked to take her out somewhere with me, my mother-in-law would immediately refuse, saying, "You go with your husband. Your marriage is still new. Enjoy your time with him." I found her behavior odd, but didn't pay much attention to it, because I was very happy with my husband. However, it seemed God had written very few moments of happiness in my destiny. One day, my husband suddenly fell very ill, and my father-in-law took him to the hospital. I couldn't understand what had happened to him all of a sudden. When they returned home, I asked what the doctor had said, and he told me that tests were done and the reports would come the next day. The next day, when I asked about the reports, he said that my father-in-law would bring them. My husband's health started deteriorating frequently, and it was always my father-in-law who took him to the hospital. Whenever I offered to accompany them, my father-in-law would refuse. When I asked my husband about his reports, he would always make some excuse. His health kept declining, and when I asked him what illness he had, he would never tell me, fearing I would be worried. He had lost faith in his own life. One night, he called me close and said, "I don't know how much time I have left. After my death, you should remarry." I said to him, "What are you saying?" "Have faith in God. Nothing will happen to you." He then took out a photo from his pocket and showed it to me, saying, "Marry this man after I'm gone." The sight of that photo sent shivers down my spine, because it was of a 70-year-old man, and I was a 20-year-old young woman. Marriage between us was unimaginable. Hearing this from my husband made me deeply sad. I prayed to God to heal him quickly, but my prayers went unanswered, and the day I feared finally arrived. I wasn't feeling well that day, so I didn't go to the office. My husband's health seemed slightly better that morning, so he said, "I'll go to the office today. Getting out of the house will make me feel better." I tried hard to stop him, but he went anyway. Just 2 hours after he left, I received a call saying that my husband's condition had worsened significantly and that he was in the hospital. Hearing this, I rushed to the hospital in the state I was in. When I arrived, I saw my husband taking his last breaths. Even in his final moments, he told me, "After my death, marry that man. Swear on my love." After saying this, he passed away. I sat there, feeling like I had turned to stone, completely lost and unable to comprehend that my young husband was gone. My heart refused to accept that he had left me. I spent all my time in my room, withdrawn and lost in his memories. I had no intention of marrying again. In fact, I was barely aware of myself, let alone thinking of a second marriage. Just a few days after my husband's death, my mother-in-law came to me and said, "Start preparing for your second marriage." I looked at her in shock and told her that I wouldn't remarry. She said, "Your husband entrusted me with your responsibility and told me to arrange your second marriage after his death." Hearing her words, I remembered what my husband had said. She continued, "I will definitely fulfill my deceased son's last wish." Looking at her, it didn't seem like she was grieving the loss of her young son. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been forcing me into another marriage. After my husband's death, my parents came to take me home, but my mother-in-law said, "She is our daughter now, and her responsibility is mine." I wanted to go with my parents, but my husband's last wish kept me bound to this place. I didn't want to marry again, but to fulfill my husband's wish, I reluctantly agreed. A few days later, my mother-in-law arranged my wedding. On my wedding day, people were gossiping, saying things like, "It's only been a few days since her husband's death, and look at her, shamelessly dressed as a bride." But their words didn't affect me. I sat there like a lifeless statue. That night, my sister-in-law left me alone in my room. I was terrified. When my new husband entered the room, I screamed because my second husband was none other than my father-in-law. I jumped off the bed, screaming, and my father-in-law approached me, saying, "Why are you scared? You are married to me, and from now on, I am your husband." My first husband had shown me his picture, but I hadn't paid much attention to it, so I didn't recognize him. But now, seeing him in reality before me, my eyes widened in shock. I couldn't believe what was happening. I told my father-in-law, "I married you out of compulsion. You are my husband's father. I can't even think of you that way. I have always considered you as a father." Hearing the commotion, my mother-in-law entered the room and said, "There's no need to make a scene. You are now his wife. And anyway, Suraj was not our biological son. We couldn't have children, so we adopted him. Suraj knew this too. He wasn't our real son. That's why he gave me the right to marry you off wherever I wished. So, I arranged your marriage with my husband so you could always stay in this house. Suraj never wanted you to leave this house. His last wish was just that." I couldn't believe my mother-in-law's words. I was unable to comprehend why Suraj would do this to me. She continued, "I loved Suraj very much and always considered him my son. That's why I fulfilled his last wish by marrying you to my husband. You should be grateful to us. I left my husband for your sake, and instead, you are turning against us." I told them both to leave my room. They left angrily, and I collapsed onto the floor. The secrets that had been revealed today had completely shattered me. I couldn't understand why Suraj had never told me that they were not his biological parents. I was trapped in an unimaginable situation. I don't know how I will get through this difficulty. Thinking about everything, I started crying loudly. I picked up Suraj's photo and began questioning him. Why did he do this to me? Why? He swore on our love, asking me to marry again, but this time to his own father. I used to regard his father as my father-in-law, like a father figure, and now here he stood in front of me as my husband. I could never have imagined something like this, not even in my dreams. I kept thinking about it all night, unable to sleep. Sleep had gone far away from my eyes. In the morning, a maid came with breakfast for me and told me that the senior madame had sent it, asking me to eat. I told her to take it away as I didn't feel like eating. I had no appetite. All I wanted was to leave this house and go far away. I thought maybe going to the office would distract me a little, especially after the catastrophe that had shattered my life overnight. As I was getting ready to go to the office, my second husband entered my room and told me that I wouldn't be going to the office today, that I would stay home. I asked him why, and he replied that from now on, there was no need for me to go to the office. You should stay at home and take care of the household responsibilities. Now I'm your husband, and you must obey everything I say. From today, you will do as I say. I will handle all the office matters myself. You don't need to worry about that." Angrily, I looked at him and said, "I will definitely go to the office." He replied, "All right, go to the office, but I will stay here in your room with you." Hearing this, I felt the ground slip away from under my feet. Then he added, "If you don't want me to stay in this room with you, then you will have to do everything I say." His words scared me, and I began to think that he might actually stay in my room with me. Spending even a moment with him was unbearable. I couldn't tolerate him in my room, so I stayed silent and stopped going to the office. After seeing the behavior of my in-laws, I started to understand why they had arranged my second marriage with my father-in-law. Before his death, Suraj had transferred this house and all his property in my name. If I had left after his death and married someone else, This house and all the property would have slipped out of their hands, and they would have been left as beggars. That's why they had me marry my own father-in-law, so I would stay in this house and the property wouldn't leave their possession. Suraj's real father had transferred all his wealth to Suraj before he died. My mother-in-law had now become my co-wife. Staying at home all the time had started affecting my health. I rarely went out and didn't meet anyone. I always stayed in my room. The maid would bring me food, and I would eat it. But my hunger and thirst had long since died. One day, when I went downstairs for something, I saw the lawyer leaving through the gate. I called the maid over and asked, "Why was the lawyer here?" She replied, "He came to discuss the will of the head of the house." I returned to my room. A few days later, my second husband came to my room and asked me to sign some office papers. After that, he started bringing papers or checks almost every day, telling me to sign them and threatening me that if I didn't, he would come and live in my room. I was forced to do as he said because I had no other option. Whenever I refused to sign, he would threaten me again, saying that he would start living in my room. I couldn't bear the thought of that, as I had started to hate him. One day, while I was in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation between him and his wife. He was saying, "If Suraj had lived a little longer, we could have gotten more out of him. Poor guy died too soon." I realized that everything they were doing was for the property. The lawyer now frequently visited our home. I tried several times to talk to him, but my in-laws wouldn't let me. I wanted to know what Suraj had left in my name that made them do all this to me. What exactly did they want from me? I had grown tired of my life and wanted to escape from all this. One night, after eating dinner, I started feeling sick. The maid, who always brought me my food, quietly told me that my mother-in-law had mixed something in my food, which made me ill. I was in such bad shape that I thought I wouldn't survive. These people were so cruel that they would do anything to me for the house and the property. I thought, why not talk to my husband? Let him take whatever he wants from me, and in return, he should set me free. With this thought, I headed downstairs to my in-laws' room. I was about to knock on their door when I heard voices from inside. My husband was telling his wife, "Never speak of this again. If anyone finds out, it won't be good, and Bimla must never know about this." I wondered what they were hiding from me now. They were always whispering in secret. I didn't fully understand their conversation, but I knew I had to find out their secret. I went back to my room, thinking about what I could do to uncover their truth. Then an idea came to my mind. Why not make my husband crazy about me? If I could get him under my control, I could get him to confess everything. One night, I got ready and went to my husband's room. Upon entering, I said, "You're forgetting that I'm also your wife. I have a right over you too. Come with me to my room." Hearing this, my mother-in-law's face turned pale. I grabbed my husband's hand, pulled him up from the bed and said, "Leave this old woman. Now, you will stay with me." Hearing this, my husband was overjoyed because he was 70 years old and I was a young and beautiful girl. Who could resist such an opportunity? Happily, he got up and came with me to my room. Once we were in my room, I said, "You have to kick your first wife out of this house. Only then will I agree to stay with you forever. Otherwise, I'll leave you." He replied, "Don't worry, I'll kick that old woman out. I'll do anything to be with you." Every day after that, I would dress up, take care of him, and feed him with my own hands. Within a few days, he was completely obsessed with me. He was ready to do anything for me. Seeing this, his wife was burning with jealousy, but she couldn't do anything because her husband was now crazy about me. He wouldn't even look at her. Whenever he came home, he would come straight to me. One day, I told my husband, "I don't want to live in this city anymore. It reminds me of Suraj. Let's move somewhere far away, just the two of us, with no one else." Hearing this, he was thrilled and said, "Okay, whatever you want." His wife, on the other hand, was fuming with anger. I said this because I wanted him to confess everything, and just as I had planned, one day she started screaming at him, demanding that he divorce me. My husband replied, "Lower your voice. Someone might hear us. We're so close to our goal, we can't back out now. This was your plan all along. How can you back out now?" His wife said, "I don't want to hear anything. I don't care about anything else. Just divorce her. If you don't, I'll tell her everything, and you know what will happen." My husband said, "Fine, I'll leave her. But keep your mouth shut." Now, their own scheme was backfiring on them. They had fallen into their own trap. But I was also worried that if he gave in to her demands and divorced me, I would never learn their secret. I desperately wanted to know what they were hiding. I still hadn't found out anything. I thought, I need to do something else to uncover their secret. That night, when my husband came to my room, I mixed a sleeping pill in his juice to make him drowsy so he would spill everything. And that's exactly what happened. A little while later, he was completely intoxicated. I told him, "I'll transfer this house and all the property to your name, and I'll stay with you forever. Just tell me the truth." He wasn't in his senses, so he started telling me everything. He said, "Suraj was my brother's son. My brother was very wealthy, and he lacked for nothing. I had nothing, and seeing him like that made me jealous. When Rahul was a year old, I orchestrated the accident that killed my brother and sister-in-law. I knew that after their deaths, we would be responsible for Suraj, and that's exactly what happened. After his parents' death, we moved into this house to take care of him. But nothing was in our name. We could only look after Suraj and his property until he turned 18. After that, everything would be transferred to him. If something happened to him before that, all the property would go to a trust. We had no other option. When he grew up, he took over the business and made it soar. One day, he told us he liked a girl and wanted to marry her. That's when we told him he wasn't our real son, but our brother's son, and that we wanted him to marry our daughter. We thought if he married our daughter, all his property would stay with us. But he refused to marry her, saying he had always seen her as a sister and us as his parents. He begged us to agree to his marriage with you. At first, we refused, but then we feared he might run off and marry you. If that happened, we would lose everything, so we agreed to the marriage. But after the wedding, he showered you with gifts and even transferred this house to your name. Every time he bought property, it was in your name. We were furious, but there was nothing we could do. Slowly, everything was slipping out of our hands. Then we decided to kill him, but we couldn't do it outright. So, we started adding poison to his food, little by little. Every time he ate, he would fall ill. The poison was slowly building up in his system. That's why I would always take him to the doctor alone. The doctor's report clearly showed everything, but I bribed him to change it and told Suraj he had blood cancer. Suraj told us not to tell you, because it would upset you too much. So, we kept it a secret. After that, my wife started convincing him that after his death, she would marry you to me. At first, he refused, but my wife kept insisting, saying, "What if Bimla marries someone else? What if they don't take care of her? If you agree to this, she will stay in this house, and we will take good care of her." Eventually, Suraj gave in. He had already transferred the house and business to your name so that you wouldn't face any trouble after his death. I tried to stop him, but he didn't listen. After that, we did what we were planning to do in a few days. Hearing all of this made my skin crawl. I grabbed him and asked, "What did you do to him?" He confessed in his drunken state. We mixed a larger dose of poison in his food, and he died that same day. After his death, my wife arranged your marriage to me so that we could take everything from you, the house, the property, and the business. We've also started adding poison to your food. After you die, everything will be ours. But I won't let you die. I'll kick that old woman out of the house. I had recorded everything he said. The next day, I reported it to the police. They came and arrested both of them. In court, I presented all the evidence, and after reviewing it, the judge sentenced them both to life imprisonment. They will now spend the rest of their lives in jail. I opened a hospital in Suraj's name, where treatment for the poor is free. I never remarried because I had lost all trust in people. I wish they hadn't done what they did to Suraj. He loved them more than his real parents. If they had just asked for the property, Suraj would have happily given it to them. But their greed led them to take my husband from me. They didn't even hesitate while doing it. People spend time with animals and grow to love them, but Suraj was their own nephew, their blood. yet they felt no mercy for him. My heart is filled with curses for those who took my husband from me in my youth. Friends, I hope you liked my story. If you did, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and don't forget to press the notification bell to get the next update first.